welcome to the December SMAC meeting. We don't have any excused absences because everybody's here. So approval of the minutes. Any comments, modifications to the November minutes? May I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second? All right, Luann seconds. Barrett approve or make the motion. All in favor? No opposition? Passes. Any signed public comment?
No, sir.
All right. So on to updates. We have Nicola.
Yeah, thank you. So unlike last month, we have quite a few things they've been quite busy in the planning area. So I wanted to kind of start with a few of them, two of the rezonings that have passed. So one on Harrington Street, that's a little bit less than 1/4 of an acre. And then Hillsborough and the Youth Center, which is about little over 3 acres. So the ones that are those are kind of the quick ones that have already passed. And then there's a few that have been deferred to either January or already have a set date. So one of them is pretty interesting. It's on Old Pool Road. And so it'd be kind of a commercial in the sense development. And there has been not a complaint, but potentially a complaint downstream for downstream flooding. So 5% or more of that development is within there. Then they'll kind of be redirected. They'll have to hold up to 100-year rate of the runoff there. So that'd be kind of entailing underground kind of construction of a vault to kind of trickle that in later on. So that's a little over 13 acres. So quite a sizable development. There's another one a few others I wanted to touch on. One of it is, maybe I should have started with the highlight there, but multiple properties, again, near 7,000 Pool Road, but it's over 500, it's about over 530 acres. So it'd be an annexation, and then a rezoning of that kind of planned development district. So mixed residential, and then I suppose potential for additional, because it's such a large area, maybe a little bit of development in there. So it's currently in Raleigh's ETJ, so it'd have to be an annexation and then kind of incorporating that one. But again, very sizable thing that they're kind of discussing. So public hearing is set right after the start of the new year, so January 3rd, kind of coming in with that. Another one is the school. So near, is it Bailiwick? Bailiwick, as I was reading it, and that's a little over 11 acres. So it's a vacant lot kind of going into the schools. There are some kind of regulations on that because of the location of being within Falls Lake. So if there's a kind of impervious limit there of 30%, with GSI, or kind of 24 without GSI, any kind of measures going on there. Again, there's other kind of, because of the location, there's other kind of information that kind of details that they have to incorporate there as well. One of them being 40% must be forested. So quite a large conversion, an 11 acre kind of school being developed over there. So a little bit larger. The last one I wanted to touch on was about 16.5 acres near Globe Road. This one's a little bit interesting because they are kind of near the noose buffers. Some would apply potentially just based on initial USGS maps. Looking at that, they believe that they would apply, potentially kind of going in and doing a soil survey afterwards to confirm. So because if there's this kind of soil survey, I believe up to 50% can be developed after that one. So a few other ones that's kind of late mid-January, January 17th, set the date on that one, but a few others on the docket as well. But pretty busy coming up to the new year, and another one's kind of deferred to March. So we'll kind of be able to keep track of those and see how those progress. And if you have any questions, happy to try to answer. I might have to defer to the more knowledgeable counterparts.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wayne?
Thank you, sir. We do have some staff updates, and a few of our new folks are here today. Let me start off by introducing Mackenzie Painter. Mackenzie is a new stormwater inspector in the development inspections team. She graduated from UNC Charlotte with a BS in Earth Environmental Science and minor in biology. And she comes to us from private industry with over a 1 year of direct experience in conducting sediment and erosion control inspections for development projects. So welcome, Mackenzie, to our team. Another addition we have is Kyle Booker. Kyle joined the capital improvements team as a project manager just a couple of weeks ago now. He'll be managing both CIP and drainage assistance projects. Kyle comes to us from a private consultant where he worked for the last 10 years with an emphasis on stormwater permitting, compliance and design, including NPDES permit submittal, stormwater pollution prevention plans, and illicit discharge surveys. Also preparing designs for stream restoration projects. So lots of good relevant experience. He graduated from UNC in environmental science and Townsend University with a master's in environmental science. So brings, having spent the last 5 years working with Harford County, Maryland on their stream restoration program. So welcome to Kyle. And lastly, it's a promotion internal to our team. Allison McGarity, who has been in our business services unit, the accounts revenue, has been promoted to the supervisor of that group. And she joined Stormwater in 2017 with 15 years of experience. And then in 2018 was promoted to the business services team. She began her new work on the billing side of the stormwater utility, managing impervious surface application, annex reviews, customer service, and billing management. And now as the new engineering support supervisor, Allison will supervise the utility fee team and manage the billing operations. So congratulations to Allison on her new promotion. So that's the team updates. Moving on to the high priority topics. As you all may recall, Stormwater was allocated funding from the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, for some stormwater projects. And because that is federal funding, we could not use our on-call engineering consultants. We had to go through a procurement process that was specific to federal funding. So we have done that and selected engineers, and those engineers were approved at the council meeting last Tuesday night. So there were 3 specific projects. One was AECOM was selected for the Rose Lane conceptual design and design work. As you recall, that's the project where there is a neighborhood that is isolated during flooding events in Walnut Creek. So that exciting project moving forward now. And then 2 other green stormwater infrastructure projects. One is a GSI design at Lions Park, which is an older park and community center inside the Beltline in Northeast Raleigh. We'll be designing green stormwater infrastructure retrofits for that park. Has a lot of impervious surface that'll be treated. And the other project that's GSI related is the Heat Island project, where we're going to be retrofitting green stormwater infrastructure as a means of mitigating the heat island. In those last 2 projects, Tetra Tech has been the selected engineer, and that's been awarded by council here recently. So excited to have those projects moving forward, and we'll continue to give updates on those because those are going to be ones that we'll want to keep track of for sure. And then lastly, no notices prior to construction to announce today. Sir, I'll turn that back over to you.
Thank you. Chaz?
I guess I'll stand.
Wait, why don't you go up there if you can?
Okay. Well, good afternoon to you all. Happy to be here. Glad to see you all again. This is a drainage systems project review, December fiscal year 23 projects. I got pointed over. Okay. So an overview of the presentation. We'll have the drainage systems and stormwater program overview. We'll look at the pending projects and the projects request list, then the funding overview, and then recommendations and questions after each project. So just a refresher, I know y'all are quite familiar with this, but the stormwater management core mission is to preserve and protect life, support healthy natural resources, and complement sustainable growth within the Raleigh community. And the drainage systems program always looks to do that. So in order to qualify, you must own property in the Raleigh city limits, have stormwater runoff from public property or street. You want to donate a drainage easement. On previous presentations, there was an extra bullet that would be here. It said you would have to pay the stormwater utility fee. Now that the policies have passed through council last month, that is no longer the case. So that has been removed. And the drainage systems program does not cover nuisance flooding or lot-to-lot drainage. So an overview of the program, we have $1.25 million in annual funding that is allotted. That doesn't mean that those funds will necessarily be spent this fiscal year. Oftentimes they're spent in future fiscal years. With that, 8 projects will be funded per year. And funding is based on the ranking. Now, keep in mind that projects can move up or down depending on how projects come in, if they're ahead of them or behind them. So look at the pending projects. We have 2 projects I'll be discussing today. We show the top 19 here. And I'll point out the fact that there's not a big gap between number 1 and number 19. You can see it's separated by just a little under 1 point. And so that means we try to be very diligent in our scoring, because any little adjustments in the scoring can throw the rankings off a little bit. So we have 2 projects. We have Morning Dove Drive, which is the second one I'll talk about, a little bit east of Six Forks and south of 540. And then we have Bayfield Drive, which will be the first project I'll talk about. That's a little bit southwestern Boulevard as you head towards Caird. So Bayfield Drive is a single lot platted 1973, built in 1974. I will give credit to the resident on this one. She has been very, very patient. This was actually the 6th project that we scored. So she has been waiting for over 6 years. And so again, credit to her for being patient and waiting through this program. Just zooming out, right here we have Western Boulevard. We have Bayfield Drive right here, and the drainage basin is 26 acres. And as you can see that there's some sinkholes all along the route of the pipe. It's within about 20 feet of the structure. This is looking downstream. The picture on the left is looking downstream. The picture on the right is looking upstream. You can see they're fairly sizable holes. She's had to cover up her property because it's a hazard, and we're trying to help mitigate that. This is looking down towards the house from the street. Again, you can see a hole right in this area in the middle of the screen. Towards the end, the pipe will daylight. You can see there's a little bit of erosion going on. Not exactly threatening the structure, but while we're out there, we'd like to mitigate some of the risk and do some outlet protection. And so the plan for this is replace about 80 linear feet of pipe with RCP, include some outlet protection. And we did look at perhaps lining, given the video and condition of the pipe. Don't think that's going to be an option. So we'd like to go ahead with a dig and replace of the pipe. And the scoring, one of the things we're doing now is we're looking at past projects. I used the Bramblewood project, which I'm sure you guys remember from last month or 2 months ago. You can see the scorings are fairly close to each other, which shows the consistency of our evaluation system. So that's very good. If you recall that there were sinkholes and replacing a portion of the pipe about the same distance, and again, these scores very close to each other. And costs. Looking at how we arrived at the cost of $102,000. We've had several submittals regarding Western Northridge that the contractors submitted their proposals. And what we did was we took those numbers and applied it to this project. So we're using a little bit more accurate numbers, a little bit numbers more recently. So with that, looking at those totals, we had the 4 contractors. So what you're seeing here is an average of the construction costs, the engineering, the contingency, which I assume would be 20%, and then the total cost. Again, this is all on average, but these are all estimates. Costs can vary as we get into the project. So we assumed about $74,000 for construction, engineering, with 11,000 contingency of 17,000 and total cost for 103,000. So with that, I'll stop and pause for questions, recommendations, comments.
We're good.
Do you want to approve this or do you want to wait until
Let's see the second one.
second?
Yeah, do it in one.
So this is actually a fairly similar project. Single property. We have a couple of sinkholes that you'll see in the next slide. So again, this is just south of West Millbrook Middle School. And I'll actually get into that just a little bit because one of the things you'll notice is that the pipe compared to the previous project is smaller. So we had a 36-inch pipe on the last project. We had 24-inch pipe on, 24-inch pipe on this project. But West Middlebrook School Development did put in to detain the 100-year storm. So that's why we're not seeing, that's why I believe we're not seeing any structural flooding issues at this moment. So we're just seeing sinkholes. So this I've got two slides here. This picture was from 2017. This is the sink, the inlet or the catch basin on the top, or the middle of the project, excuse me, the westernmost portion. That was from 2017. This is 2020. So you can see the difference in how it's grown. We think that the best option for this one, again, go ahead, dig and replace. We would install an outlet right here at the property line, even though the line does go a little bit south. These property owners to the south have been commendable. They've been open to projects, but they have not signed our request form. So we've just stopped short of the property line. Again, majority of this action is going on near the blue line. Comparing scoring, again, going back to Bramblewood, again, very similar to each other. I'm sure if I added a third column with a Bayfield, that they would be quite similar as well. But again, it shows you the consistency of the scoring. So I'm very impressed with the team and their consistent scoring as well. Looking at the cost, again, same metric. Looking at Western Northridge, average cost for construction $87,000, engineering $13,000, contingency $20,000, total cost $121,000. You'll notice this is about $20,000 more than the previous project. There's sewer line in the area, so I counted for that extra work trying to get navigate around the sewer line is a little bit longer. Also adding a catch basin. So total project costs, we're estimating Bayfield 103,000, Morningdale 121,000, total 224,000, which would leave us 718,000 left. With that, I'll stop for questions, comments.
The contractors, A, B, C, D, are they the same for both?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, sir.
What are the downstream implications? You said that you're kind of, building that, extending that pipeline down. Are there any kind of potential unintended consequences of adding that extra flow into the street, or where's that extra flow going for that second home?
So you're talking about window.
Yeah, so when you're kind of piping it out down the street, I mean, as far as that basin goes, maybe I'm sure you mentioned that to begin with, but do they have any additional issues just by, funneling it straight there to the street?
Are you tying into another pipe there, Chaz?
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, that's a better question. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, I missed that part. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's okay. And just in general for everyone, in terms of these diagrams, the red lines are always closed conduit, underground pipes. The blue lines are always open channel pipes. The green lines are sanitary sewer pipes. Just that's the schematic that we use consistent with IMAPs.
Yeah.
So that same legend is used to help you get your bearings.
And I probably confused by adding a blue line here.
Yeah.
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 I thought of like yellow, but that's
Yeah.
yellow and that's orange, so
That's fair. It was a quick slide. Thank you for clarifying. Both of you.
thank you.
Just to clarify, it looks like it's a 24. Is that going into a 15 below that?
Does it say?
That's an 18, but we haven't had any issues with the flows. So I
I'm
don't,
curious.
yeah, that is a good catch.
Good point, though. So we're keeping the current sizes same
Right.
at this point, but yeah, keep the dialogue going with downstream in case there's issues that come up.
Any other questions? We have a motion to approve both projects. All right, thank you, Terrell.
Second,
Mark seconds, all in favor? All right, no opposition, that's unanimous. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Barbara?
Around to the other side. Hi. Well, thank you, everybody. We're really pleased to have this opportunity to get some feedback on our public engagement plan for the Pigeon House watershed. When we last met in October, we did an overview of the watershed planning program, if you recall. And we touched on public engagement, H&H modeling, water quality modeling, asset management, all the stuff that we do in watershed planning. And this presentation is a deep dive into public engagement. We really like your feedback. And I'd like to just give a shout out to Ellen Colon, who's here from our Office of Community Engagement. Thank you very much for coming. Yeah, Ellen has been graciously reviewing our plan. She came to our first Pigeon House meeting and she's here to hear your feedback firsthand. So Ellen's the expert and we're just up here presenting. So please don't hold back on feedback. That's why we have to be here. Thank you. All right, so the Pigeon House Branch watershed is located right in downtown Raleigh. We have Oberlin Road, kind of the boundary on the western side. The east, Whitaker Mill Road is the boundary in the north. And Hillsborough Street's the boundary on the southern side, and the Capitol Boulevard corridor going through the basin. So do we have any SMAC numbers? You live in Pigeon House. All right, we have our stakeholder. Perfect. So eventually all the water from Pigeon House drains to Crabtree Creek. And we developed the public engagement plan with help from a consultant for Pigeon House, but we'd like to use that as a template moving forward. All right, and last time we talked a little bit about why public engagement is so important for watershed planning. We talked about how we're using these plans to figure out where to invest millions of capital dollars. We want to hear from the community on what their stormwater issues are and what's important to them. Last time we did touch on the critical success factors for our watershed planning program. So we said, if we do these things, our plans will be successful. And we had a success factor to build trust with the community through equitable engagement, awareness, and education. And if we can do that well, we will better accomplish that first factor, which was to understand the level of service needs and expectations of the community. All right, so we have the public engagement plan in your packet. And we will go through all the components of the plan. Like I said, we did ask for feedback from Ellen and from the Department of Equity and Inclusion. So they gave us some valuable feedback on messaging and things like bring the meeting to the people instead of bring the people to the meeting to the people instead of the other way around. So we were happy to hear that and are looking forward to incorporating that. We're still in the early stages of that public engagement. So I'm just going to cover one more slide on goals and objectives and then turn it over to Sherry and Ariel to go through the rest of the plan. All right, so we have three big picture goals. First, to equitably engage the community in watershed planning. Next, to highlight stormwater programs and messages. So since we are doing such a big outreach on these plans, it's a really good time to share stormwater services. So what can the stormwater program do for you? And we try to do that, for example, at our public meetings by having different groups represented. We had Raleigh Rainwater Rewards, drainage assistance, other groups other than planning, right, in the meeting. And we also wanted to promote stewardship of the watershed. So the idea that the more you can engage people, get them active and interested in stormwater problems, the more ownership they will have of the solution. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to Sherry to talk a little bit about the demographics.
I'll walk through the rest of the elements of the plan and then we'll get into what we've been doing. And I did want to mention that this plan is based on our a public participation playbook that has been developed by the city and also our equity framework that was developed as part of our Hairsafe watershed study. So a lot of these elements, including creating a demographic profile of the watershed, are things that have been recommended in the city's playbook. So here, this is based on census data, and we're looking at race, age, income, English-speaking households, household tenure, education, and poverty rates. So we're looking at this on a census tract and census block group level. So the map here, you can kind of see the outline of Pigeon House. These are all the census block groups within Pigeon House. So this data, we've broken these categories down into the block groups. So this data will help us understand more about where and how to target our engagement with different populations. So the next part of the playbook deals with identifying our stakeholders and their level of engagement. So this graphic is also from the city's playbook, and it kind of displays the increasing level of engagement. So inform is a one-way communication. We're pushing information out to the public. Consult, we're asking the public for feedback. Involve and collaborate, those allow stakeholders more say in the decision-making process. And then empower is basically delegating the final decision to the stakeholders. So here we're in our early stages of the watershed study, and our main audience, our main stakeholders that we're dealing with right now are the general public and community groups, and the level at which we're engaging them is inform and consult. As we develop projects out of the watershed studies, we may involve those groups more. There may be we may be doing some collaboration later in the project or later in later phases as we develop projects with city agencies and government agencies. And then the plan outlines a proposed approach to engaging our stakeholders. And again, these outreach mechanisms are from the city's playbook. And we've tried to highlight on this slide some of the things we've already done in phase one to engage our stakeholders. So the first two, awareness campaigns and educational programs, those are in that informed stage where we're pushing information out. And we've been doing that through direct mailers, emails, social media posts. We have a website and a fact sheet. And then the last three are more consulting with our stakeholders. So we want to hear feedback from the public about what they've seen in the watershed. So we have a public survey that's open. We've had our first public meeting on the project, and we've also attended a couple of informal community events to hear feedback. So we're going to be talking a little bit more about what we've been doing with these things. And I'm going to turn it over to Ariel, who's going to talk about the awareness campaigns and what's.
Just one question, just door-to-door canvassing, is that a part of your engagement?
That has not been a part of the engagement to date, although that's something we could potentially consider doing.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. So these are just some statistics, and some of these numbers may not seem big, but I promise you they make a big impact. But just to start off with the email, we sent out 3 emails to all of the residents that live in the Pigeon House branch watershed. And so far, we had 11,659 opens and 1,135 clicks, which if you don't necessarily know email stats, that's really, really good. So obviously it's looking like people are getting engaged, being involved, and responding to the emails very well. For social media, we have had 5,495 views and 159 engagements. I'm pretty sure that's a span of over 5 Twitter and Facebook posts that we've had. And this is just a selfless plug. Please follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And then also we sent 2 postcards over the span of when we were trying to get that engagement. And we sent that to over 5,700 residents in the Pigeon House branch. And that included information about the public meeting and also getting involved with the online survey.
What was the total number of emails?
It went to 6,000 each email, so it was about 6,000 emails.
Over 3?
Yes,
Okay,
so it was 6,000 in all 3.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay,
And they went to the same.
got it.
Yeah. And then we also have website statistics here. So on the right-hand side, this is kind of an overview between April and December of the number of visits that we've received on the Pigeon House watershed website, and also the number of users. And as you can see, between August and November, we saw a significant increase when we were pushing out those emails and social media posts. So it's just very clear that people were getting engaged, being involved, and trying to learn more about what's going on. And not only is it important for them to visit, but also it's important to give them accurate information. So we received some positive feedback here from someone who went to the website and said that it was a very much needed study and remediation, which just shows that they're learning all the correct information, they're getting what they need, and they're being well informed through our website. So this is just the beginning. We're looking to expand this more and push more engagement out to the residents there, but this is what we have gone through so far. And I'll hand it back to Sherry.
Thanks, Celia.
Yep.
Okay, so I mentioned we have a public survey that was put out on September 19th. It remains open. And you can actually go onto our Pigeon House webpage and see some of the results, some of the statistics. And we intend to leave that open for at least another few months to get feedback. So that is in a mobile friendly format. Paper copies available upon request. And we've also had it translated to Spanish language. So since this watershed study, as Barbara mentioned, is going to be determining our priorities of where we put our capital funds in this watershed, it's important for us to hear back from the community in the watershed about issues and opportunities for improvement. So we've asked questions related to flooding, erosion, infrastructure, pollution, and we also asked some demographic information, which I'll talk a little bit about later. And then we had our public meeting. That was in early November, and we had held this at the Halifax Community Center, which is located pretty much smack dab right in the middle of Pigeon House Branch watershed. And that was from 4 to 7 in the evening. And in keeping with our big goals to promote stormwater programs and stormwater messages, we are setting these meetings up as kind of a drop-in open house style. So we have a number of tables here representing different stormwater programs. So at Watershed Planning, folks could learn about the study. We had lots of big poster maps and also some computer screens where we could zoom in and talk with folks about specific issues in the watershed. We had a stormwater maintenance table where we even brought in a pole camera to show folks how we do stormwater inspections. The drainage assistance and stream stabilization teams Chaz and Dominic were represented. They had a table there. Raleigh Rainwater Rewards, we had a really nice poster showing the location of all of those projects. And there have been 49 of them approved in Pigeon House of all different types. So it's a good example for folks to learn about that program. Also highlighted volunteer opportunities and our green stormwater infrastructure initiatives. So we had in total about 15 staff at this meeting, as well as a few staff from our consultant that's helping us with this study. So it was a really good opportunity to get a lot of engagement with the folks that came to the meeting. A lot of one-on-one time. Okay, so those are some of the things we've done. I'll give you an overview of who we've heard from. So between the survey responses and the public meeting that we held, we've heard and gotten feedback from about 250 people. About 66% of them have provided us with their address, which allowed us to map them with the watershed, and that's the black dots you see here. And about 80% provided demographic info, which I'll show on the next slide. So we overlaid where we got responses with the land use in the watershed. So these gray areas that you see here, these are state government, parks, schools, universities, and Oakwood Cemetery. So some of these, like state government, are large stakeholders that we would expect to reach out to individually as the study continues. So we wouldn't necessarily expect to be hearing back from them through our online public survey. The red areas are commercial, industrial, and vacant property. And then the green are single family residential. So if you see the black dots, we've got a good geographic spread of responses across the single family residential community. Where we've done a little less well, where we've gotten a little less engagement is with the apartments and condos. So that's the yellow areas. Traditionally, those have been difficult for us to reach. We don't have their contact information through our billing database like we do with some of the single family residents. So that's something we've been talking with housing and neighborhoods, community engagement, trying to get some ideas about how to really reach out to the demographics that we're missing and the areas that we're missing. So we did ask a couple of demographic questions on the survey related to race and housing tenure, so that we can compare those back to the overall demographics of the watershed. So blue is what the total demographic composition of the watershed, and orange is where we've seen in our engagement response. So the Pigeon House Branch watershed is not a particularly racially diverse watershed, and we're seeing that in our results as well. About 88% of our respondents identified as white. For housing tenure, the watershed is almost 50-50 homeowners and renters. But we're seeing most of our response coming from those homeowners. So I think that corresponds pretty well with what we've seen on the previous slide, where we're missing some of those apartments and condos. So that's an area where we'll be focusing outreach. Okay, so that was kind of who we heard from. We'll talk about what we've heard. We had a ranked choice question on the survey that said, what are your, please rank your concerns in the watershed. So the highest ranking was street flooding, followed pretty closely by pollution. Yard and home flooding and aging infrastructure and erosion followed that in order. For our flooding question, we had an opportunity for folks to place a pin on a map where they've seen flooding issues. They could also submit pictures and they could submit comments. So these blue dots here, these are all the pins where people went in and said, you know, I have a comment or an issue related to flooding. And these cover street flooding, yard flooding, and we have a few instances of structural flooding with the picture on the left, just basement flooding. So they're pretty well spread throughout the watershed. And this is important information for us as we move forward, knowing where to target our modeling in the next phase of the watershed study, and also helping us to verify those models to particular storms. So, you know, we have the in most cases, folks provided their information. We can follow up if we need more information about their particular flooding issues. Did I get out of that? Okay, so the second highest ranked issue that we saw was pollution. And the question we asked here was phrased to gauge and promote awareness of the existing programs that the city has aimed at pollution prevention. So we said, please, if you are aware of any of these programs, please check. 88 people checked at least one box with Raleigh Rainwater Awards and our illicit discharge programs being the ones with the greatest awareness. So if you look at the number of responses here, this is an area where we have some opportunity to continue to promote these programs with the public. So we're doing that through what we're doing at our public meetings, setting up the booths. We're also plan to do that with our continued outreach as we're sending more emails and other communications through the watershed study. And the last category I wanted to highlight here was infrastructure and erosion. This question was set up similarly to flooding, where folks could place a pin on the map, submit pictures, and give us comments. And you can see here, similar to flooding, we saw a lot of folks interacting and giving locations of infrastructure erosion issues. So as part of our watershed study, we've already gone out and done inspections on stormwater pipes that are within cities right of way. We will be doing some more inspections, culvert inspections. We'll also be doing some stream walks that'll help us define the extent of erosion along some of these branches of our channels and look at the condition of some of the constructed channelized sections of Pigeon House Branch. That picture on the upper right is a section of retaining wall along the actual branch. So we know there's some poor condition infrastructure out there. All right, so that kind of gives you a quick overview summary of where we're at to date. This is certainly not where we stop. It's where we will be continuing. We're in this first phase of the project, and engagement's going to continue throughout the project. So some of our future things to look at here, efforts to target some of those demographics that we haven't gotten as good a response from. Again, working with housing and neighborhoods, community engagement, folks like Ellen to help us with that. And we plan on having at least one more public meeting for information gathering purposes. That would probably be early in the new year to try and get a wider audience of that group. We'll have at least 2 more public meetings during the future phases of the project. One after we have some initial results, and one as we're kind of wrapping up the project. And ongoing education. So this ties in with our goals to promote stormwater programs and to promote stewardship of the watershed. And then last, I wanted to mention, we'll be coordinating with a separate stormwater project that's looking, just kicking off and looking to address the total maximum daily load in Pigeon House Branch. And the proposal there is to develop a watershed action plan. So there will be lots of community engagement involved with that, and that'll span over the long term. So that'll continue after our watershed study's done. So we're going to be coordinating with that effort as well. And my last slide is just, Barbara and I like to say, we're just the engineers. There are a lot of folks at the city who have a lot of experience reaching out to the community. So we're relying on suggestions from them and helping them, and certainly appreciate all their input. And we also appreciate any input from SMAC's perspective as well.
How are you guys coordinating with development plans along like the Capitol Boulevard corridor that's in the floodplain? Isn't there a lot of parks development in there? I work it right by the Halifax building. We have public meetings, so I drive around, and I guess it's a park off of West Street between Capitol.
Yeah,
How do you guys,
Smoky Hollow Park.
yeah, how do you guys coordinate with all of that? Is that a different division altogether, or is that in consideration in your planning?
That'll definitely be considered in our watershed plan. Also Heather, there she is. She has a lot of involvement with parks and recreation, about that park and what will be done with the Pigeon House branch stream through the park. So we're trying to, look at all the city projects that are going to be going on in the watershed and
So y'all are just more high level, I guess.
right now, we're in the phase where we're planning, and we're gonna move into a phase where we've got more data and are doing some modeling. So right now, we're kind of at an overview phase, but we will be considering all those things when we get down to the phase where we're identifying projects and looking at specific actions.
I guess I just help, you guys did present a few months ago, and I'm sorry, I forgot most of it. So just help us, like, the plan lands on the desk. And is it like a greenway plan where someone goes in and tries to develop a property and they have to designate, an easement? Or is it a watershed plan? I'm just trying to figure out what this roadmap is, because parts of Capitol Boulevard, not just Smoky Hollow Park, but parts of Capitol Boulevard itself are going to be expunged of roadway and become this big super park and all this great wetlands. And so trying to figure out when you do this, where does it land and what teeth does it have? Is it a guidebook? Is it a mandate? Is it hey, we're gonna spend $12 million and fix this? I just go backwards just a touch if you could.
Yes, of course. So I think, and Barbara can chime in too, what we're trying to come up with out of this is to identify capital improvement projects to address issues in the watershed. So this is a planning effort for us, and we prioritize the projects that are coming out of this plan. So some of them, flooding someone's basement, maybe a near-term, very high priority issue. Some of them may fall further out because we want them to align with the Capitol Boulevard, realignment project or a future park. So they may just be further out in our capital improvements plan so that we can coordinate as more details become available. So it's
a CIP guidebook.
It's
Basically.
CIP.
Okay. All right. That's cool. Thanks for.
And if I could add, and there may be triggers to certain pieces of it, like the example of Smoky Hollow Park. We're going to be actively involved in the management and implementation of that project because such a big part of that park includes stormwater components. And then there's other triggers, for example, the Capitol Boulevard corridor. There's been a corridor plan put in place. The trigger for that is there's a couple bridges along there that are going to be slated for DOT replacement. And when that funding becomes available, that triggers looking at realigning Capitol Boulevard, replacing those bridges, stream restoration that we have budgeted into our CIP that would go along with that. And so there's triggers that kind of coordinate different pieces of it, but we've got the planning in place, the cost estimates in place, and the budget in our capital improvements plan available at the timing as close as possible to be able to implement those projects as they move along in the plan.
And then, thank you for that. And I guess my last question, that there are some, I don't know about this watershed versus other watersheds, but there seem like there may be there are a lot of residents, but there's also a lot of commercially developed land, right? It's downtown, right? So compared to other watersheds, it may be one of the higher volumes of that. So those people haven't been, what's the engagement approach there? You're talking a lot about residents. I'm just trying to figure out where is there a voice there or not, or I don't know. Just do they matter? Should they matter? Maybe a rhetorical question. I have no idea really. I'm just trying to figure that out.
Yeah, on our
Where they
list,
fit.
potentially identified stakeholders are business alliances, and other large property developers. So we haven't engaged them in this initial phase, but that's something that we'll be looking at doing as we go along in the process as well. So, we wouldn't really engage them with this public survey, or they're probably not going to come to our public meeting. It's probably going to be more like a one-on-one, meeting with Stormwater to kind of introduce the plan. So a little bit different approach, I think, with those folks.
Yeah.
And there are some big stakeholders like DOT is a big.
Yeah,
one with that whole
yeah,
capital
exactly.
corridor, the state is, another one. So we have identified those as stakeholders.
Yeah.
But as Sherry said, there'll be maybe some more one-on-one types of meetings and outreach with those types of stakeholders.
Yeah. Yeah, that's.
I just want to say it's really exciting to see. I think a lot of times you see these projects that kind of underway, but just seeing that even from the initial part of this project, how much emphasis is put on stakeholder engagement. And clearly it's not just fill out a survey and you're just putting it out there and leaving, you're really taking a deeper dive into who's responding and, what gaps do you need to fill. So I definitely want to just say I appreciate that. And it's a really exciting effort. As far as the apartment goes, they have those, I'm sure there's going to maybe data privacy, as you mentioned, you can't just, if you don't have the information as far as email addresses, that's what it is. As far as, maybe looking into for apartment complexes, those management companies, or how do you get like an internal, I'm thinking on the housing side, it's kind of a HOAs or kind of a leader there, but if it's on the other side, if it's, management companies that probably own quite a few of those, if they can post that, or it might be appropriate to send that. I'm not sure what legal avenues there are for contacting those people or just gaining awareness. Because I think, a lot of those, the data that you're finding, the pictures are really powerful to say, you can do a stream, you can't just canvas the entire area. So having those historical photos would be really valuable. So yeah, maybe that's not legal, but maybe looking into those avenues could be
Yeah,
helpful.
thank you for that. We'll be looking to get those kinds of contacts.
Cool.
I guess along those lines too, I'm not sure if it's accessible, but the Nextdoor app potentially could reach those
Yeah.
apartments and condos.
Yeah, and Ariel, I think, has ability to do some posting on Nextstream.
Yes, yeah, so we did do one. I don't know exactly in regards to apartments, how that works, but we were able to create a post and kind of do a targeted post in the Pigeon House area. And that did receive some feedback, which is really great. But I will reach out to our main communications and get more information about apartment complexes and how that works. But next door, yes, we do have an active following on there. So I could definitely look more into that in regards to apartments.
How have you engaged St. Augustine's University in this, or have you?
We haven't done anything targeted there, so that there's a small sliver of that that's been kind of splits watersheds. But I do believe that we've talked to Equity and Inclusion, and they have some contacts there. So that will be a stakeholder that we can reach out to kind of one-on-one and see how best to engage with them.
Yeah, I think that would be good. I was just looking at, your ethnic demographics. So basically, your numbers say that 2 either Black or brown people showed up, either filled out a survey or came to these events, which, according to the package you sent, anywhere between 35 to 75% would be people of color. Another, I think it's page 57 on this packet they sent us for stormwater, had the communities that are engaged. Now, technically, Tarboro Road Community Center is not. I mean, it's on that line. But since St. Augustine's is a part of this, I would think maybe a more porous approach. So maybe not as hard line of watershed, but maybe invite all the university and then some of the Tarboro Road Community Center, because I think this graphic is great. Basically, as you go east, the blacker and browner ethnically it gets. And so one of the ways around getting over this hurdle would be to talk to St. Augustine's, which is good. Maybe talk to Tarboro Road again, which technically is not the watershed, but it's on that line.
Yeah.
And then also some door-to-door canvassing tends to give good dividends with engagement, particularly if we're looking at ethnic demographics.
I think Tarboro Road Community Center has a meeting space as well, so that'd be one we could consider.
No, it does, and it's right on that line. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
I will like to also add again, with Ellen, a few months ago, there was a Latin festival that was near the Pigeon House area, and she took some of our materials and handed it out to folks, and that actually did get some additional feedback from the Latin Hispanic community. So that was, we saw that as a great opportunity to get some of that engagement. So that, I definitely agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
I want to add something. First of all, I want to say that the team has been doing an amazing job. Kudos. I think some of the problems that we see here with the apartments, and they're just the same problems that we see across other departments when they do community engagement. But one of the main things, and this comes to, I know that you said about the businesses, involving them as stakeholders, they are starting from scratch, which is one of the things that we deal with as the Office of Community Engagement, is trying to get people to actually engage the community from the beginning. That doesn't happen very often. You know that something is happening once you start breaking ground in your backyard. And then you have a lot of angry people. And we have been trying to kind of change that a little bit. So I have to give kudos to you guys in Stormwater, because they're doing exactly what we have been asking all the departments to do. But part of that means that we're gonna have to take it in stages. So first, you're gonna try to get the wider population, which they have done with, residents, and you're gonna get the single family households first. Now we're gonna try and target more of the apartments. Then we will go to the next stage, which is what you were saying, and then that's when we'll target more businesses. We did see that it's true that some of the, we don't have a lot of diversity when it comes to, but also the area itself. It's predominantly white. When you go to those areas, they're gonna be, like you said, in the borders. So that is a little bit harder. Door-to-door canvassing is a great idea. The problem with our offices is that we sometimes don't have staff capacity. So we depend a lot on boards and commissions to actually help us do this type of work and get the word out. But I'm taking notes. I think that you guys, I appreciate everything that you guys are the feedback that you have provided. And we will continue to work together to make sure that we can get some of these things. But I really would like to work more with some of those kind of borderline institutions that can possibly help bring those numbers up. So, thank you.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all your.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Yep, Barbara again. It's the barber shop.
We just talked about participation and now it's precipitation. Why that? But if I say participation frequency curve, you'll know why. Okay. So we wanted to provide an update on some work we've been doing, the precipitation frequency analysis, and then talk a little bit about where we might head in the future. So start with some background. Stormwater staff, we've been noticing anecdotally that, hey, we're getting these big rainfall events more frequently. We hear that from residents when we go out. We hear from them that, hey, this flooding used to not happen very often, but now we're seeing it all the time. So in 2021, we hired a consultant to help us perform a statistical analysis of the rainfall in Raleigh. And we know there's a lot of new and evolving work in the industry. So we're thinking about, what does all this mean for the design manual update? So this presentation is going to cover all the topics. But first, what do we mean by precipitation frequency estimates? Well, that's the set of curves on the graph. So it's the precipitation depth for a specific duration that has a certain frequency of occurring. So on this graph, we have precipitation depth on the y-axis going from 0 to 30 inches, a duration on the x-axis going from 5 minutes to 60 days. And the frequency is represented by the curves. So on this graph, the green line, for example, is a 1-year frequency. That's the rainfall you would expect to see once a year. The blue line is the 100-year frequency. That's the rainfall you would expect to see once every 100 years. So these curves are typically developed based on statistics. And then tables are developed from these curves and put in design manuals so that you can size infrastructure. So that's why these curves are important. So next background slide, just want to spend a minute talking about what is currently in the stormwater design manual. And Sally's here to keep me on track. So the design manual has precipitation frequency estimates that were developed in 2002 based on the available technical resources at the time with input from Dr. Malcolm at NC State. And the technical resources available at the time were Hydro 35 and TP 40, so older rain atlases developed in the 60s and 70s. So the design manual said you can use these values, but it doesn't say you have to, which was good because in 2004, NOAA published Atlas 14 for North Carolina area, and that's the latest official documentation of the precipitation frequency analysis. And those numbers from NOAA are based on data that goes through the year 2000. So the concern is, well, if we've seen these big rainfall events more recently, then that is not reflected in the NOAA data, and it's certainly not reflected in the table we have in the design manual. So that's why we did our study. All right, so brief agenda, we're going to give an overview of the consultant study and the results. We'll talk about some of the ongoing related work in the industry, and then Sally's going to talk about the impact of all that on the design manual. Okay, so we started this study in 2021, and it was a high-level study with 4 main tasks. Review of the area rainfall gauges, then looking at trends in that data, then performing a statistical analysis of historical rainfall, and developing a revised set of tables. And then we compared these tables from the study back to the design manual and back to NOAA Atlas 14 to see what the impact was. Okay. So this is a map of the rainfall gauges that were considered for this study. There were 5. The 2 green dots are maintained by the National Weather Service. So you have the RDU airport rain gauge and the North Carolina State rainfall gauge. They have the longest periods of record. So from like 1948, 49 to present. The red dots were gauges maintained by North Carolina State University. It was determined based on a review of the data that red dot to the southeast called Clay had too much missing data, so that station was discarded. The North Carolina State, the Raleigh University, as it looks like on the map, that also had some missing data, but that was supplemented or filled in with data from the RDU airport or Reedy Creek gauge. So the next task was to analyze rainfall trends. So they did take a look at plotting rainfall for the rain gauges, looking at trends over time. This is a plot for the North Carolina rain gauge starting in 1948 and going through 2020. So this is annual rainfall, and you can see the trend is going up. The same type of analysis was done for maximum 1 hour, 3 hour, 6 hour, etc., all with the same trend going up. Okay, then they performed the statistical analysis of the rainfall. So this is the result for the North Carolina State gauge. This is the same information that was presented on those curves that we looked at the first time. The duration, 5 minute to 24 hour, is on the rows. The recurrence interval is in the columns, so it has 1 year all the way out to 1,000 years. So, for example, on this table, the 100-year 24-hour storm is 7.78 inches. And then the question is, well, how does this compare to the design manual and to NOAA Atlas 14? What was the impact? So we'll look at the design manual first. So this same kind of setup on this table. So we have the duration on the rows, recurrence interval across the top, And if it says lower on the table, that means that the data from the consultant analysis was lower than the data in the design manual. If it's higher, that means the data from the consultant analysis was higher than the data in the design manual. You can see there's a lot of lower numbers. There are some higher numbers here, but when we looked at the difference, it wasn't that much higher. It was like 0.01 inches, so not a huge difference there. Okay, so then we compared back to NOAA Atlas 14. Same kind of table here. So you can see that there is a quadrant of lower values. So the consultant numbers were lower than NOAA, but you can see there's a lot higher values on this table. So on average, these revised tables were 5% higher than NOAA Atlas 14. So what does this mean? It's a good question. So we concluded that on a whole, these revised tables were more conservative estimate than NOAA Atlas 14, not significantly higher than the table in the design manual. And there was a recommendation to revisit the analysis every 5 to 10 years to keep pace with the changing environment science. All right, so that was this high-level study that we did with these results. And now we can talk a little bit about what's going on in the industry. And then Sally will conclude with what's going to happen in the design manual. All right, so there will be a NOAA Atlas 14 update. This study was not completely funded at the time when we had our consultant study going on, but now it's completely funded and moving ahead. And they will be updating the precipitation frequency estimates for the mid-Atlantic states. And their prediction is that with the increase in number of stations, the length of record available, that this will have a considerable impact on the frequency estimates. So this study is funded by the states, the Department of Transportation in the states. That's one. And then there's the NOAA Atlas 15 update. And this study was funded by a congressional bill that passed in May of this year. And it is a precipitation frequency analysis for the entire US. It's going to be, they're thinking, published in 2 volumes. So the first volume would look at historical trends and observations. And the second volume would look at future climate projections. So what kind of safety factors could you apply to that first volume to account for climate change in the future? Yeah, I don't have a completion date for this one yet. They're currently soliciting comments on the approach. So you may be wondering, how can you have a NOAA Atlas 14 update going on at the same time as the NOAA Atlas 15 update? And that's a good question. I think a lot of people have that same question. But there's a lot going on in the industry. There's a lot of research. So for example, NOAA has a project with University of Illinois and University of Wisconsin-Madison to do the research for NOAA Atlas 15. There's a project locally with NC Department of Transportation and NC State looking at future design storms. Arizona State University has another project looking at safety factors similar to what Chaz looked at in his analysis. And there's a lot more examples. So Charlotte Water, I know, is partnering with Colorado State University and doing some research in this area. So there's a lot going on. The question is, well, what does this mean for the design manual?
Yeah, thanks, Barbara. So, I'm sorry. We want this design manual update to last a long time. So we are not going to put hard numbers for rainfall into the design manual itself, because that design manual has to go, because it's adopted by reference into the UDO, it has to be approved by city council. So that's a lot of steps to go through to make any changes. So what we are proposing to do is to reference a document that will be on our website that will say, here's, as of this date, we use this rainfall method or resource. We haven't made a decision about the initial rainfall rates to be made. Currently, we see most people using Atlas 14. We could require the existing design manual table. I will say, Atlas 14 has a lot more heft behind it. in terms of peer review and, being established in the water resources industry. I wanted to mention, so another way that, there's several ways that people are accounting for changing rainfall rates. And so one of those is updating the rainfall rates. Another way to do it is to up the design storm that you require things to be designed for. And so that's something that we are doing with this revision to the design manual. So we are for inlet design and gutter spread calculations. So basically for how fast water can, how much water can sit on the road and how fast water has to get into the inlets. That we currently require that to be for the 2-year storm, and we're going to require it for the 10-year storm, which means that there will be bigger inlets and, more provisions will have to be taken to keep water off of roads. We are currently the very common standard for road design is the 10-year storm, although DOTs usually require a higher storm when it's a bigger road. So like an interstate might have to convey a bigger amount of water under it than a local street. And so we are proposing that we'll keep the 10-year storm for, for the small sites, but that once the drainage area to a pipe is 25 acres or more, that it would bump up to being the 25-year storm. So that's a way that we're looking at hedging against future increasing rainfall is by requiring these further design storms. How would that? Yes.
Any other questions? Feedback?
How will you get the updated rainfall chart that you're gonna use? Do you have to get city council to approve that, or will you have to put?
No, my understanding is we can, incorporate it by reference. We can refer to outside technical resources.
But you could change that without having to go through.
That's our understanding.
I just want to say I commend it. Appreciate the, especially, excuse me, upping of design standards going. That, we can chase the rainfall, but we can get the results quickly with the standard increase. So I appreciate that.
One of your graphs showed 10 inches of rain increase in 70 years, from 48 to 2020, 40 to 50. How does that compare with other areas of the state or country? Or can you get that amount of detail? Does that make sense?
Was it the?
No, you gotta go. This is near the beginning.
Oh,
It's
the
your,
Oh, like the
Your
second
consultant.
slide?
yeah, it was one of your, yeah, this, yeah.
That was from the NOAA Atlas 14 website.
Yes,
This,
I'm sorry, no, go, keep advancing.
more.
The bar in line. Bar.
Yes, that's that linear plot.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Oh,
It's after this, we had a trend
Okay,
line.
trend
Yeah.
line.
There you go, yeah.
Yeah, so this is historic rainfall rates at that combined station. So this is, yeah. So you can see it goes up, 1 year you have a drought year, 1 year you have an excess rain year, but the trend goes up.
Does the trend go up, I think, maybe
Yeah, so I was asking-
regionally across the southeast all look like this, or does it west look like this? or
Yeah,
does-
that was, yeah.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that.
The data is publicly available, so it could be combined in this way.
Yeah, but this study only looked at the Raleigh.
Oh, yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that'll be an interesting result from the NOAA Atlas 15 effort is to see how it's looking in different parts of the country.
Yeah, I mean, just from a layperson's perspective, which I am, 10 inches in 70 years just feels like a lot.
Mhm.
And so I'm just curious, when we look regionally, are we special?
Right. Well, I know I have seen at a conference, I've seen a presentation by one of the folks at NOAA, and they do there's increasing trends in terms of rainfall amount and the intensity of how much rain comes down per hour is increasing, and they can show that on multiple stations throughout the country.
That's a lot.
Urbanization has a lot to do with it. Because this area is so rapidly developing, you might be seeing a statistically higher increase than other more rural areas North Carolina are seeing, but there is an increase overall.
Why are we seeing that in urban areas more than rural?
Because the amount of, well, no, that's actually the rainfall.
Yeah, that's
Right.
just right.
Well, the gauge stations though.
Yeah, you would see that affecting us.
Yeah.
Maybe it's
Streams,
a
but-
effect going on. And
In the models I've seen, the southeast part of the country in general is tending to get wetter. And the southwest part of the country is getting drier. And we're seeing the evidence of that in general, but that does seem to be the continuing trend we're seeing. The tricky thing about climate change is though, that you have trends, but the variability can increase too. So it doesn't mean we're out of the woods against the droughts. You know, we can still see high variability in any individual years.
Anything else? Thank you. All right.
Sally and Heather.
No, Sally and Heather. Yep.
And 14 minutes early. Let's keep it going.
Time for the tour, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Painting.
Thank you. That is Glenwood Avenue, our attention. Yes, thank you. Last presentation before our exciting GSI tour. So thanks for hanging in there. We're gonna have a quick GSI plan update. This will be just a brief travel through where we've been, what we've done so far, and where we're going as far as our GSI action plan. And so this is a quick background for those of you who haven't been with us long. So back in summer of 2019, SMAC referred this task to, council referred this task to SMAC. That task was to prepare a plan for the city to continue advancing the use of GSI. So SMAC formed a GSI committee and with the support of city staff, developed a plan which then presented to council and the Growth and Natural Resources Committee in June of 2021. And then a month later, council accepted and endorsed this GSI plan. So what's not on the slide is that since then, so Kevin Boyer presented a year ago in December to SMAC. So Sally and I thought now would be a good time to give an update a year later. Since then, Kevin Boyer has retired. I was promoted into, yes, he is here. Anyway, I was promoted into the water quality supervisor position, and Sally was promoted into the plan review supervisor position. So together, we are now advancing this plan and coordinating it with lots of support from many others as well. We thought it would be good, since now we have two people advancing this plan, just to give you a little bit of more detail into our spheres of influence. Why are there two of us advancing this? So I'm in the water quality section. Our team is already implementing GSI. We're already building relationships internally and externally. You saw the Raleigh Rainwater Rewards program, very popular program. Justin and Stephen and his team are working to implement GSI with our community members. Megan Walsh is in the back over there. She and Amy Farinelli are working hard to implement city-led projects with GSI. So really, when you think about our water quality section, my role, it's a lot of the funding. We really want to support external partners and internal partners, as well as our own stormwater-led projects with funding for GSI. And then also, we naturally do a lot of education and outreach. So we are building partnerships with the community as well as with our peers to get GSI implemented. So with that education, outreach, and involvement, we're getting a lot of lessons learned. We are trying to make sure we share those lessons learned internally, provide resources to our own colleagues to make sure we continue to improve our designs, implementation, and maintenance of GSI. So that's kind of my role. Sally?
And so I took over the stormwater plan review group. And so I'm the supervisor of that group, and I get to also have the GSI Advocate Fund title, which I share with Kendall Ethler, who's joined us today. And so our role in the plan review group, I tag team with Heather in terms of keeping tabs that we're moving forward with advancing this GSI plan. But we in particular are looking at implementing the policy for city projects, which I'll be talking more about, and educating and communicating with the private development community, and then looking at design guidelines and standards.
We'll go ahead and get a little bit more into the plan. Is it seat?
I can't remember. Yeah. All right, so there's 6 actions in the action plan. The first is to lead by example and to use GSI in city projects. So that touches a lot of things that we already do as well as things we plan to do. So that's the work the water quality group is already doing, and that's our city policy, which we'll dig more into. It's also the resources to support that. And then support and incentives to provide developers. This is some things we've done in the past, like the Green Raleigh Rewards program, like fact sheets, like making changes to the UDO, that sort of thing. So kind of those efforts to continue to move things forward are in that action item. Item 3 is about increasing the use of GSI as a rezoning condition. Item 4 is to include GSI in all types of city planning documents, from roadway and BRT plans to parks planning and etc. And then 5 is very related to 2, but we want to reevaluate those UDO text changes we made in the past and see what's working and what's not, and then make additional changes. And then item 6 is to continue to build the program for GSI maintenance, because if we don't maintain it, what's the point in doing it to start with? So getting that life cycle going. So we're going to talk about what's in progress and what's complete. So the GSI city policy has a draft of that appeared in the action plan. And the goal is to demonstrate the use of green stormwater infrastructure in city projects, so show all the different ways it can be used. In some city projects, we're treating stormwater above and beyond the development requirements. So either by going into a park that is not doing development and increasing the amount of stormwater treatment, or working with a project that might be doing a redevelopment to provide stormwater treatment, even if it's not required by regulation. And then to use GSI instead of gray infrastructure when compliance is required. So for example, if we've got a new fire station coming online, let's look at doing fire retention in the landscaped area rather than having an underground vault do the detention and having it be out of sight and not providing the benefits beyond stormwater management, like habitat and heat island mitigation and aesthetics and that sort of thing. And then we're also looking to develop GSI champions within city departments. So we're already on our way to this, but continuing to coordinate with and educate and bring people from those coordinating departments into the fold. And I'll talk about them in a minute. So the basic process of how this works is we'll do a really initial screening during the conceptual design. We're only going to be looking at projects that have land disturbance. So if it's a building interior project, we're not going to be involved in it. We're going to focus on what projects with bigger budgets, figuring that those are the ones that can afford to have some additional scope added to them. We've heard some concerns. Hey, if I've got a $100,000 sidewalk project and you want to add $50,000 worth of GSI, you've had a big impact on my project. And then there's going to be detailed evaluations during design. Kendall and I are going to be resources to those teams to help. We both have experience evaluating things for GSI, so we'll work with those teams. And then early in the design process, we'll make a decision, a go, no-go decision of, is there the resources to continue to finalize this design and implement it as part of the construction. And Heather's going to be part of those conversations from a funding standpoint and a prioritization standpoint as well. And so we're hoping to see many of them go forward. We're hoping that, we're requiring all of them to evaluate it. And then we're going to track those evaluations and those decisions and hopefully learn some things about if GSI isn't being implemented, why not? And in terms of implementing this policy over the past year, the stormwater staff has met with the folks who lead CIP projects. So Parks and Rec, roadway design and construction and transportation. We're about to meet with water, and we've met with the construction management folks who do the vertical projects and all the building projects. And we're also coordinating with the city's strategic plan initiative. So this is part of the strategic plan. And so one of the next steps is we've formatted an administrative policy, the way administrative policies should look. It's just needs a signature by the city manager. And we're moving forward with the policy becoming effective for fiscal year 24, which would start in July 1st, 2023.
Thanks, Sally. So moving to GSI project identification. So as Sally mentioned, this GSI policy would require GSI evaluation for many projects. So what we're trying to do is we're reaching out to our different internal departments, getting lists of their priorities in fiscal year 24, their CIP project lists, and seeing how many of these do we think will include GSI evaluation and potentially GSI. So then that way, hopefully we can begin to plan our budgets to support as many of those as we possibly can, and also work with our partners to see if there are other funding opportunities for them to take advantage of so they can also include GSI. Just want to thank Barbara and Sherry because through their watershed planning effort, you saw GSI is specifically included as a tool for addressing water quality concerns. And so we really appreciate that strategic look at where we can best fit in GSI within the watersheds themselves. And then also, like Sally mentioned, not all of these city-led projects are going to fall within this evaluation requirement. And so our team is still working internally and externally with partners to identify opportunities for GSI retrofits. One example would be traffic calming. A lot of times that doesn't disturb a lot of land. They might be low cost solutions that they're looking at to implement quickly. But what we're trying to work with them is, hey, can you save enough space that we can retrofit a fire retention bump out later? So right now our consultant support is helping us look at the next priorities of locations for traffic calming so we can early in design think about how much room we might need for these traffic calming devices so we can come back in and retrofit in a cost-effective way multiple traffic calming options for GSI. Mentioned funding. So a lot of our funding comes from CIP. That's fed by the stormwater utility fee. But I just wanted to note that we are getting a lot of different grant sources as well. So ARPA, you've heard of ARPA, over $1 million for GSI projects. We are currently writing a grant to the North Carolina Land and Water Fund for $1 million for Smoky Hollow Park. We have gotten grants from the Division of Water Resources for our subsurface gravel wetland. And with our partnership with the Water Resources Research Institute of North Carolina State University, they are bringing over $225,000 from environmental enhancement grants and 319 grants. So we are really supplementing our CIP funding with grant funds as well, which I think is a wonderful way to build partnerships and also make the most of our taxpayer funds. So I wanted to just note that even before this GSI evaluation is in play, these are already projects that include GSI that are in design right now. And that is thanks to some of our past leadership building these relationships, some of our current staff working with staff in other departments to make sure that GSI is considered. What I find really promising about this list, which is going to grow, is that a lot of these are highly visible projects. You see East Civic Tower, Gibson Plaza Play, or Gibson Plaza. Those are projects, by the way, that we are contributing up to $1.5 million of stormwater funds to support GSI in. But it's not just stormwater-led projects. You see construction management projects that have GSI. We have transportation or roadway design and construction projects that have GSI. park-led project, transit. So we are really finding that we have champions throughout the city now that are including GSI projects, and that's what we want. So very promising, diverse group of projects that will have GSI. I wanted to talk about our partnership a little bit more at Biltmore Hills Park because it is a unique one. We are partnering with WRI of NC State University. And one thing I really like, not only the grants we leverage, the partnerships and their staff support, but they've actually have the capacity to build a stewardship crew with community members. And those stewardship crew members are actually trying to get their neighbors out to Biltmore Hills Park to engage with our staff, engage with the park itself. So the first picture is some of the stewardship crew. They led an event where people used apps to inventory the trees at Biltmore Hills Parks. With that data, scientist Johnny Boggs gave a nature walk to people from the community, telling you a little bit more about the trees based on this new tree inventory that was collected by community members. And then there was even an outdoor floral arrangement course where they talk about GSI, but also people get to take home a nice floral arrangement, some native flowers included. So it's just a nice way to, really bring the benefits of green nature and really impact in a meaningful way community members. Like, this is a good thing coming to your community. And so again, just like Sherry and Barbara were talking about, we want a feedback loop. So we're telling people about GSI. We have signage that is going up. I see we need more work on GSI, on the community. R3 has great publicity, but we need to work on these CIP projects some more. But we're getting the signage up at this is Glen Eden Pilot Park. And I've been talking about this pilot project for a long time. It is here. We have our first phone stand for visual monitoring by citizen scientists. We have a dashboard up, and we already have people taking pictures at Glen Eden and telling us what they're seeing. So we're asking them, what kind of animals are you seeing? What kind of plants are you seeing? What are the water levels? Is there trash in the device? And they're taking pictures. And so you can go to this dashboard, go through the photos. You can see the trees changing colors already. And then you can also kind of find out what people care about, So with that information, we also have more eyes on the ground to help maintain our practices as well.
So one of the things we have done is in terms of that, there's action items 2 and 5, where we're looking at incentives for private developers and how we can, what we've done in the past and what we need to do in the future to our design resources in terms of the UDO, the design details, and the design manual. So we have interviewed a number of different staff groups, both in stormwater and outside of stormwater, as well as some designers in private practice. And we got some feedback in terms of what was working and what wasn't with the GSI incentives we've implemented in the past. So one thing that's working is that we have demonstration retrofits that Heather's talked about. Something that's working is the GSI compliance in city projects, like those roadway projects, that list that Heather shared. We have eliminated some UDO barriers. So for one example of this is that you can now put a stormwater control measure that is considered GSI into your outdoor amenity space in your development. There's a portion of that has to be like pedestrian friendly, but there's a portion of it that can be landscaping. And so in that landscaping portion, it can be a stormwater treatment. And then we have been working with this group and with council to get folks knowledgeable and engaged. Some things that need to change. We heard a number of specific things about there being a lack of clarity around the requirements for GSI compliance. So for example, one thing that came up is whether GSI means exactly the same thing as low impact development. And we could probably talk for hours about that. But in terms of our overall program, we're using them synonymously. However, when it comes to stormwater compliance, low impact development means a really specific kind of compliance. And we feel like you are also incorporating green stormwater infrastructure when you don't use that compliance method, but choose stormwater control measures that provide those multiple benefits, even if you're doing traditional compliance calculations. So if you, and that basically is like matching the amount of the volume of water versus calculating the nutrients. And so we think you can calculate the nutrients and still have great permeable pavement and green roofs and fire retention and that sort of thing. We basically heard that there's not enough incentives for private development, that there's private developments doing GSI because that's what they were already going to do. But it's not, they're not doing it because the city has provided a specific incentive towards it. And so that's something that we need to do some further research on in terms of what effective incentives are going to look like in terms of time and money. So for example, one thing that the UDO changes we made is that there's now a part of the UDO that says you can get reimbursed for doing GSI, but nobody wants to be the first person to do it. And so that's something we need to figure out, is that we need to like really be clear on what that process is so that people can feel confident that it's not going to slow down their project to participate in that program. And then we've heard feedback about our maintenance program and the ways in which that needs to improve, and that's ongoing work within the stormwater division in terms of, you know, closing the loop so that the maintenance, our maintenance expectations are the maintenance that's happening. So in terms of things that we're getting started on or upcoming, we talked about the design manual in last month's meeting. Just a couple points. We're looking at GSI not as being this separate thing, that like doing stormwater can mean doing GSI, and GSI will be fully integrated through the manual. We're also updating the design criteria for stormwater control measures to include some recommended practices. And we've talked about those recommended practices being required for city projects because those practices will help with long-term maintainability. And then some things that came up that in those interviews that we're still evaluating, we heard we currently don't allow people to treat the right-of-way and have it count towards their credit for their project. And we've heard that, hey, if you would let us do that, that would encourage GSI in the right-of-way. And we've also heard, hey, is there a way that we can do partial LID compliance? And that's something that requires a little more thought of how that would work. In terms of that rezoning condition action, we've talked to the planning department and we've heard how this can work. So we are going to write up a list of example rezoning conditions that would address both GSI and runoff rate control or flooding issues. And we're going to bring those to this group at a future meeting. And basically what we heard from the planning department was that how other departments have worked this when they were, as staff, we can't say, here's the zoning condition you should use, but we want to get those out into the public domain so that they're suggestions. And they suggested that if SMAC considers those, and I'm losing the right words in terms of the process, but basically if they're part of your process and your documentation, then we can refer people to those public documents in the future.
I'll write out pictures. So we're also doing these interdepartmental charrettes and training. So Sally mentioned we do have a strategic initiative committee made up of many different staff from different departments. So through that committee, we will be sharing the standard details that we currently have for GSI and asking for changes, revisions that will make it better. These standard details really are meant to have some sort of consistent, easy way for project managers to include GSI in their construction plans and have contractors who are familiar with these details that can construct them properly. And then also we're going to be looking, let's say, with the parks gardeners and other staff at the planting plans. As Sally mentioned, maintenance is always a challenge. And so what we're looking at is potentially creating templates for different parks that have different maintenance tiers. You know, some are gonna be higher maintenance, some won't. So maybe having some standard planting pallets just as a starting point for designers and project managers to use to say, hey, this might be a good type of planting pallet for lower maintenance parks. If you want like those knock them out of the park, sort of like beautiful, you know, bioretentions at a higher maintenance park, like the Raleigh Rose Garden bioretention, then, you know, that might be a different type of planting plan, depending on the available maintenance staff. We're also working with our consultants and maybe some staff from the extension office to do some trainings. So two things that are really important for successful GSI projects is construction and then landscape design and maintenance. So we're going to have two trainings separate, maybe the same audience, maybe different audience, but really hit home to our own internal staff for city-led projects. We want to make sure we are leading good construction methods and that we know a little bit about landscape design and maintenance because we want to design with maintenance in mind. So, no, that's it. There's the Raleigh Rain Garden bioretention or Raleigh Rose Garden bioretention rain gardens. So please go out and see that. But do you have any questions about our update?
How many projects have the city implemented for their GFI? I feel like I've recognized a lot of your pictures, so it'd be very interesting that map.
Yeah, you know, that's a great, so we thought about a GSI tour. And so that, you know, citizen science monitoring program is starting to have some locations on a map.
Like ballpark off the top of your head.
Do we?
I would say ballpark.
Okay,
20.
Oh, do you know about how many GSI projects, city-led are kind of ballpark in the city?
It's a slide in last year's presentation. If we count the rainwater rewards.
Oh, well, yeah.
Oh, well, that's a lot more.
Our truly city project, it was 120 or so. Bring that down to more like 20 to 30, I would venture to guess for city led.
That'd be a cool educational map.
Yeah. I'd go on that tour.
Okay, I'll write this down. There's a potential tour and online tour.
Sure.
You're talking about potential tour. I know the Office of Sustainability is kind of creating a map of green roofs and stormwater and other buildings and other things that were sustainable. I'm not sure where that program went, but I know that was something that was being worked on. We're trying to coordinate and include the stormwater stuff in that.
I'll have to check with that. I was just at a Swarm 2022 conference yesterday where they're talking about monarch waste stations, the biophilic cities as designated. And I was like, what if our stormwater devices could be monarch waste stations as well? So I think we really are trying to do some cross connections like that to reach different audiences and just show all the many benefits of green stormwater infrastructure. So that's a great idea. I will check with Nicole and Megan.
Yeah, they're tracking the B City USA data too for that. So they can keep applying for that every year. So
You guys coordinate the art museum?
So actually, yeah, we have a potential stream restoration project that we're going to be working with them on at the museum park. And we've been out there several times. Staff has been to look at their stormwater devices out there as well. So yes, we do. Rachel Woods is someone that I coordinate.
Did you do anything on Blue Ridge Road there? It's listed Blue Ridge Road. It's a
So
site.
that actually is referring to the Blue Ridge widening project. That's a project that's about to go to construction
Okay.
and includes some GSI.
Sally, one of your slides, you said you designed GSI beyond requirement. Is that like insurance? Is it anticipating at some point in the future an increase in flow or velocity, volume? Or is it just
It's
random?
actually addressing the past. So, so many of the city facilities are older sites that came into being prior to there being stormwater management regulations. And if they're just following the regulations that we apply to everyone, including the private sector, they wouldn't have to do any stormwater treatment. So we're saying, let's do some stormwater treatment and make things better as part of our redevelopment project.
yeah, and I can at Baileywood Park, we're with a civil engineer working with us, but because of the amount of impervious coverage, they didn't have to. There's a new building going in. but they don't have to, because of, it's under the 24%, under the, whatever, the threshold, they didn't have to do any stormwater. City didn't, as a private developer.
Right.
But
Basically,
with
there's so many
this-
trees that kind of offset.
Yeah, and Amy and Heather have come in and said, okay, well, but we'll pay to do some additional work because you are capturing all this, you have all this new pavement, so.
Got it.
So there's, I don't know, $80,000 project out there or something like that, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you.
So under other business, I will be going on sabbatical for the first quarter of next year, January, February, March. I've been at St. Ambrose for 10 years and I've been eligible for sabbatical for 3, but haven't taken it. This is my first sabbatical. And I applied to the Eli Lilly Corporation Endowment and got a $50,000 sabbatical grant. Sabbatical, as you know, is a time of refreshment and renewal. I'll be taking a step back from active ministry for that quarter. And my family and I, which is my spouse, 3-year-old daughter and 1-year-old son, will be retracing the footsteps of an Ethiopian minister. One of the things I study is Ethiopian Orthodoxy, even though I'm an Episcopal priest, because Ethiopia is an example of what I call indigenous African Christianity. It's Christianity on the continent of Africa before for colonialists and slave traders engaged the continent. It's Christianity without the yoke of white supremacy. And so beginning in January, my family will be in Ethiopia for 3 weeks during the high holy days of Christmas and Epiphany. We'll then be in New York City, where this Archbishop came in 1950 to set up the Ethiopian Cathedral there for a week. We'll then be in Trinidad and Tobago for 2 weeks, where the Archbishop came and set up the Ethiopian Diocese in the West Indies. And then we'll be in Jamaica for 2 weeks, where this Archbishop spent 40 years of active ministry as the largest Ethiopian Orthodox population in the Caribbean, and it's where he's buried. So we'll be gone out of US for 2 months. And then for March, I'll be setting up on my family's ancestral land in Franklin County, this vision of a retreat center based in Ethiopian and Episcopal religious traditions. So I won't be here. I've talked to Wayne and Graham. So Graham as vice chair will take the lead of SMAC. And Nicola, as our liaison, will step in case Graham can't be here. His calendar he should be
It's
here.
clear right now.
But in case he can't, Nicola will step in. I know that there are elections for SMAC offices in March. And so I have one more 2-year term that will begin March of next year. So I'll let this group know I do have desire to continue as chair, and there may be someone else who wants to be chair. And so that election will happen in March. But I'll be back April 8th, I think, is my first SMAC meeting after sabbatical.
We're doing nothing but field trips the next 3 months. We don't want to have to do real work. He just set a trend.
I said it.
That's exciting.
Yeah,
Isn't
that's
it amazing?
Then can we follow him and do the field
That's
trip?
right.
I'm
So
so
jealous.
jealous.
Yeah.
It sounds amazing, an
Yeah.
opportunity. So,
For your family
and-
too.
and
know.
well earned,
Yeah.
so.
Pretty brave with a 3-year-old and 1-year-old.
I
Yeah.
know, right? Reinforcement. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else? All right. I know we have a tour.
We do.
I can't go on a tour because I have to go see my 3-year-old's dance recital. So have a wonderful end of the year holiday, and Happy New Year. So may I have a motion to adjourn? All right, Daryl. Yeah. Is there a second?
Sure.
All right, one. All in favor? All right, no opposition. Very good. Good meeting.
Thanks, everybody.